Rachaad White is an early pick for having a breakout season in 2023. We'll tell you if that's true and give you our own breakout candidates. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Please subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you always get the latest episodes when they drop. And yes, that means you can also listen to Locked On Bucs on the Sirius XM app, so make sure to check us out there. I am James Yarcho, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. Joined by my monster of a co-host, Mr. David Harrison. You can find him over at BucsGameDay.com. And of course, you can follow everything on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and at DHarrison82. David Harrison locking it down over on the Pewter Report podcast as well. Crushing it.
No, I appreciate it. I didn't know you watched or listened. It was a good time speaking with Maddie Matera over there. Always good to talk to the Pewter Report clan. Always good for you joining us here on Locked On Bucs, making us your first listener, your first view today and every day, especially the everydayers that, unlike the Denver Nuggets, never take a day off because the Denver Nuggets aren't playing on Monday because they're lazy and they deserve to win the Western Conference Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers.
Oh, so you
good
got
morning.
Dream matchup then. Oh,
I did. 16-year-old me is very nervous because typically the Nuggets don't beat the Lakers in the Western Conference.
This is going to bite you in the butt. I'm going to remind you of that.
It's okay. I'm okay. Good morning, footballs. Peter Schraeger is doing something most of the national media refuses to do, and that is something that Matt Matera and I talked about on their podcast, and that is give the Buccaneers some national level love. On Monday's episode of the show, Schraeger named Buccaneers running back Rachaad White his breakout running back of the 2022 NFL season, saying, quote, "I love this guy's game, and I love the message the Buccaneers made through free agency and the draft." What did they do? Well, Leonard Fournette is no longer with the squad, and Rachaad White is, and everyone thought that they would draft a running back on day one or day two. No, this is our guy. Rachaad White's our dude. They beefed up their offensive line in a lot of ways. We know we love the big boy Cody Mauch, who's going to be next to Ryan Jensen now, and they're going to be blocking and making holes for this guy now. Rachaad White is my breakout running back. I would expect him to be in the top 10 when it comes to NFL rushing leaders this season. Again, that's Peter Schraeger of Good Morning Football. James, what do you think of Schrags, as we call him when you're friends with him, as we are? No, we're not.
Good friends.
What do you think of Peter Schraeger calling Rachaad White not only his breakout running back of the season, but a top 10 rusher in the National Football League?
I can absolutely see him being right on this. And I think we're both, I was all aboard the Bijan Robinson train. I thought it would have been a great pick for the Buccaneers. It didn't come to fruition. They didn't draft any day 2 guys. They didn't draft any day 3 guys. And it's not that I wanted them to replace Rachaad White. I just wanted them to help Rachaad White because the writing was on the wall early last season that Rachaad White was the best running back on the Buccaneers roster and should have been given more opportunities than he actually was, basically because it boiled down to the fact that Leonard Fournette is a name more so than his production. And Rachaad White was trying to earn that, that mantra. He was trying to earn his playing time, all that stuff. And, you go back to Dave Canales' introductory press conference. He raved about how much he loved Rachaad White. And it started with Rachaad just running over his team in Munich. So we knew that Rachaad was going to be a big part of the offensive game plan. We knew he was going to be a big piece and a big focal point of what they wanted to do and how they were going to accomplish what they wanted. And that's going to lead to a lot of opportunities. And I mean, as it stands right now, I know we talked about Zeke and Dalvin Cook on yesterday's episode. There's other people saying that the Bucs should make a move for Austin Eckler. As it stands right now, the Buccaneers number 1 and number 2 running back are Rachaad White. He should be getting, if the running back room doesn't change, he should be getting 70% plus of the running back touches, and he could have a monstrous season.
Okay. So that's a lot of nice things you said about my fellow Sun Devil, and I'm glad that you did, because I'm about to pour a little bit of water on this.
Ooh.
But listen, let me finish. Not in a negative way, just in a different than what Peter Schraeger said. So the question for this segment is, do we agree with Peter Schraeger? I do and I don't. So the 50-50. I believe completely that Rachaad White could be very well could be a breakout running back this NFL season. Absolutely. The absence of Leonard Fournette, the fact that the team has not, as of yet, really gotten a legitimate running partner, right? And I think that's really what we're talking about here. It's not necessarily getting a number 2 back. It's getting a running partner, right? Because they're going to have a number 2 back, but number 2 backs aren't really the issue here. Where I disagree with Peter Schraeger is I don't think that Rachaad White is going to be a top 10 back when it comes to rushing leaders this season, because that's a very specific projection. Okay. Listen, last year, amongst all NFL players, Rachaad White was 44th among them in yards per rushing attempt. 44th. Now, some of that is on Rachaad White, some rookie mistakes on hitting holes and all that stuff, of course, but a lot of that was on the offensive line. Now, when you take away the quarterbacks in this thing, because I forgot to filter this thing by stinking position, there's about 5 or 6 quarterbacks that are ahead of Rachaad. So really, you make him like the 38th running back in the NFL last year in yards per rushing attempt. Rachaad is going to need about 700 more yards this season than he got last season to be a top 10 running back. I'm not saying that's not possible, but what I'm saying is, from a Dave Canales offense, what I think is that Rachaad White is going to get a very good amount of his yards through the air. So could Rachaad White absolutely be a breakout running back? Yes. For your fantasy roster, guess what? The yards and the touchdowns all score the same. In fact, if you're into the right kind of league, the yards that are gained and the touchdowns that are gained on a reception actually gain you more points. So you're happy with what I'm telling you right now, because I do agree that Rachaad White could be or will be a breakout running back in this year's NFL season. I don't think he finishes as a top 10 running back in rushing, but that's okay. Top 10 in total yards, I could get on board with that. I haven't looked up the numbers on who the top 10 total offense guys were and what that number would look like. But if you told me, or if Peter Schraeger said, I think at the end of the year, Rachaad White is a top 10 offensive producer out of the running back position, I would agree with him more than I do if just saying straight rusher.
I can see that. I can absolutely see that. Where I think, and I'll make this brief, where I think Schraeger is probably on the right track, saying that he will be a top 10 rusher, is because today's NFL, as you and I both well know, most of our listeners fully know and understand, it's not an era of the NFL where it's the single back rushers anymore. There's so many multiple back sets that if Rachaad gets the amount of carries that he is likely to, with Keyshawn Vaughn and Chase Edmonds behind him, I think almost by default, he's going to end up in the top 10, because you think of the guys that are going to get the most rushing yards in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Austin Eckler, probably Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard, and then Christian McCaffrey. We're not to 10 yet. Then who are you looking at? Are you looking at Breece Hall? Are you looking at DeAndre Swift? It gets kind of murky.
Miles Sanders.
Yeah, Miles said it gets kind of murky after that, because now you're moving into predominantly 50-50 splits. So yeah. I think just by default, if this is the running back room that the Buccaneers have, and Rachaad gets 70 to 75% of the carries, he'll end up in the top 10 just out of the sheer number of carries that he'll end up with.
Yeah, look, to get top 10 in rushing yards among NFL running backs last year, you needed 1,066 or more. That's all you need. Like that's like you said, that's today's NFL. So certainly, and as far as the yards per average or per carry number, the more carries you get, the more in a rhythm you can get as a running back, right? So that number could certainly go up. Look, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying I'm not going to say he will be a top 10 rusher, but I'm down with he will be a top 10 producer from the running back position, which again, if we're talking fantasy, which is some of this conversation, you're good with that. So yeah, draft Rachaad White in your fantasy drafts in all formats. But James, Rachaad White's not the only potential candidate to be a breakout contender or a player rather for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who do we see as breakout candidates for the 2023 Tampa Bay Buccaneers? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers, you can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Right now, FanDuel has the Bucs as plus 550 underdogs, worst odds in the NFC South, to win the NFC South. And again, I'm taking my Denver Nuggets to defeat the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference Finals, not just on Tuesday because they're taking Monday off. They need their rest, but in the entire series. And I'm taking the Nuggets per game on the money line. If you're bold enough to take them with the points, by all means, let me know, and I will applaud you. But I'm going money line because I am a wimp. There's no better place to bet all your bets in the NBA playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel official sports betting partner of the National Football League and the NBA. Thanks again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or your first view today and every day. Every day is tomorrow is Wednesday, and that means it's WTSP Wednesday. So Evan Klosky will be here to tell you everything you need to know about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if it disagrees with anything that I say, it is wrong, and you should tell him so on Twitter. While Peter Schraeger went and stole my breakout candidate, that's okay, Peter. That's what friends are for. We're each going to give you one here that we're really, really high on early in this process. And James, I'm going to let me go first because that's the way it should be.
Sure. We're going in alphabetical
order. My breakout candidate is going to surprise some people. Everydayers, you know that I was not on board with this player that long ago. But my breakout player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in realsies and in fantasies is quarterback Baker Mayfield. Listen, a funny thing happened while I was talking to Matt Matera of the Pewter Report. And Matt Matera probably doesn't know this, but I didn't really prepare for our conversation. I typically pride myself on my preparation. James knows this. He's seen the scripts when I do solos, and he's like, bro, I don't know how you write all of that stuff out. But I was like, you know what? I want my conversation with Matt to be organic. I've had a lot of conversations with Matt, usually off the air, but I'm like, you know what? We talk a lot. And I think that Pewter Report viewers and all that like will enjoy the raw conversation. So I didn't do a whole lot of scripting and statting and all this stuff. But a funny thing happened, James, while we're talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, and we're talking about Dave Canales, and we're talking about Baker Mayfield, this weird thing dawned on me. We are looking at this situation with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback room all wrong. Now I'm gonna preface this by saying this. We've already said on this show several times. By now, Jason Light, Todd Bowles, and the position coaches who have been in Tampa and are still in Tampa since Kyle Trask got drafted, they know what they have in Kyle Trask. Bruce Arians knows what they have in Kyle Trask. If those people believe that Kyle Trask could legitimately be a future leader for this franchise, by all means, make this thing an open competition. But if they know, and they know at this point in time, Kyle is backup at best. Listen, Ryan Griffin, very wealthy young man, backup quarterback for life. Okay. But if they know that that's Kyle Trask's destiny, they need to just cut the concert, cut the movie, cut the dramatics. Just let's just do this thing. Right. Because here's the thing. To us, Baker Mayfield is a new quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dave Canales is the new offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But in reality, Baker Mayfield is a quarterback that Bruce Arians has had a game plan for years. We've talked about this. The Cleveland Browns were one of the teams that Bruce Arians was willing to go coach when he came out of retirement. Why? Because of Baker Mayfield. If you think an NFL head coach comes out of retirement to go coach a quarterback without an idea of how he can make that guy better, I don't know what to tell you. You're wrong. Dave Canales was on the Seattle Seahawks staff. What did they try to do last offseason? They tried to trade for Baker Mayfield. If you think that an NFL passing game coordinator, former passing game coordinator, quarterbacks coach is not part of the team developing a plan to bring in a young quarterback who's restarting his career, again, you're wrong. So Bruce Arians had a plan for Baker Mayfield's talents. Dave Canales was part of a group that had a plan for Baker Mayfield's talents. And now the three of them are finally together. Yes, they're just now putting it in place. Yes, things have changed a little bit. There's a little bit of tweaking here and there. The roster is not the exact same. But believe me, and Bruce Arians, again, I know he's upstairs, but believe me, that dude has influence. There is a plan here, and there has been a plan here for Baker Mayfield. Tom Brady was the number 12 quarterback in fantasy football last year. Mm-hmm. Think about that season we just watched.
Yeah.
He was the number 12 quarterback.
That's
without
QB1.
Ryan Jensen. Without Ryan Jensen, that is QB1 in most. If you're in a good enough league, that is QB1. If you're in anything less than a 10-team league, you need to find a new league or expand. Anyway, that's QB1, right? Those QB1 numbers. And look at the season that he just had. Like, look at all the booty who and we on Locked On Bucs did last season over how bad of a year Tom Brady just had. The Buccaneers have fixed the left tackle situation. They've certainly gotten better along the left side of the offensive line from last year. Their center is back. The right side, okay, we'll have to see. Chris Godwin is in his second year coming back from the ACL injury. A lot of people that suffer ACL injuries, they say the first year is still basically recovery. Like, you're still basically recovering that first year. So Chris Godwin this year is your post first year. So again, hopefully we see an improvement. Mike Evans is, Mike Evans. Russell Gage, hopefully will stay healthy and do some more of the good things that we saw there. And there's some other potential. Rachaad White, a running back, not only that can run the ball, but can also catch the ball. And we'll see what they add in the meantime. Look, I'm not saying that Baker Mayfield is better than Tom Brady, but what I'm saying is that Baker Mayfield's production could be the same or better because of the circumstances surrounding Baker Mayfield here in Tampa this year, and the fact that he's got an executive upstairs and an offensive coordinator that have both in the past planned for executing his style of play.
And I love everything that you just said. Mostly because you have finally come around to James was right, and he's a genius, and he sold me on this months ago because he was right. Yeah. But something else that
the fastest victory lap in the history of victory laps.
Something that we haven't focused on at all in all of this is Baker Mayfield's mobility. And I'm not calling him Josh Allen. I'm not calling him Jalen Hurts.
Josh Allen isn't mobile. He's just big. Like Ben Roethlisberger wasn't mobile. He's just bold dudes. I'm just saying.
And that's an element of Baker's play that we haven't talked about, and the Buccaneers haven't been able to utilize in the last 3 years. Because, Jameis was kind of mobile. He made you nervous anytime he started to run. But Tom Brady picked his spots and got super amped for like 6-yard runs. But Baker Mayfield's mobility and his ability to extend plays because of that, to avoid danger, yeah, it's going to get him in some trouble, but it's also going to create some opportunities for the Godwins, the Evanses, the Rachaads, the Russell Gages that were not there last year. So I love your pick because all I heard throughout all of that was I'm picking Baker Mayfield because James is right. I am going to give you my breakout candidate, and we're going to talk about some roster moves that the Bucs made coming up next here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on the Locked On Bucs podcast. And I was supposed to give you my breakout candidate in the last segment, but David loves Baker Mayfield so much that he took all of my time, and that's okay with me. That is 100% okay with me. I'm here for it. My breakout candidate goes hand in hand with yours, David, because you take a look at the 4 years that Mayfield spent in Cleveland, and we can talk about the fact that he hasn't had a 1,000-yard receiver since 2000. I believe it was 19. It was either 18 or 19. And that was when both Odell and Landry went for over 1,000 yards. And since then, it's been kind of up and down. It's been a lot of Nick Chubb, which bodes well for Schraeg's breakout candidate of Rachaad White in terms of Baker being used to that kind of run game. But something that's been consistent for Baker Mayfield, throughout his year starting in Cleveland, were thrown out last year. The Panthers weren't, the North Carolina Tigers were not a thing. And the Rams were just they were already just plummeting back to earth. The consistent thing that I've seen is the play of the tight end position. So our everydayers know that I was going to find a way to talk about my dude, Cade Otton. In 3 of the 4 seasons, the Baker was the starter in Cleveland. The tight ends went over 600 yards. David Njoku by himself, Baker Mayfield's rookie year, was like 674. So Baker loves to target the tight end position. Every year that Baker was in Cleveland, the tight ends went for 6 or more touchdowns on the season. Now you have Cade Otton, who showed flashes last year as a rookie, has the opportunity to step up and be the number 1 tight end on this team. There's no more Cam Brate. They drafted Payne Durham. He's going to be basically the Cade Otton of last year, right? It's going to be Cade Otton's show, and then Durham is going to step in and make some plays. He's going to get in the end zone a time or two. You have Keith there, but this connection between Mayfield and Otton could prove to be very, very fruitful.
I agree. And I want to give a shout out to our good buddy, JC Cornell, who I'm pretty sure is the first person I saw this year talk about Baker Mayfield being the comeback player of the year. Because if he finishes as a top 12 quarterback in fantasy scoring, pretty good chance he might actually win that thing. I know last year there were a lot of people on that train when he got traded to Carolina, but they forgot that Matt Rule was still there. That's a big problem. All right. So I went Baker, you went Cade Otton. I kind of had a feeling you were going to go Cade Otton because you are a Cade Otton guy.
I am.
But very good reasons to go Cade Otton. Now, the Buccaneers did make some roster moves on Monday, including a familiar arrival to Tampa for offensive coordinator Dave Canales. Greg Allman tweeting on Twitter, because that's where you tweet things. Quote, Bucs made three signings, because I can read. Official today. Wide receiver David Moore, outside linebacker Marquise Watts, and safety Kedrick Whitehead. Now, James, the most significant name in those 3 signings, and there were some other moves that we'll mention here in just a second, but the one that we need to talk about probably the most is wide receiver David Moore, because he's familiar with offensive coordinator Dave Canales from their time in Seattle.
Yeah, and he spent 4 years in Seattle. Last year, he split his season between, I believe it was Denver and Green Bay. But the previous 4 seasons before that, he was in Seattle. Over the 4 years, 78 receptions, a little over 1,100 yards, and then had 13 touchdowns. Now, his most recent season with Seattle in 2021, he had a career-high 35 receptions. He had 417 yards, which is the second most in a season in his career, and a career-high 6 touchdowns. So I'm going to think that David Moore, with his relationship with Dave Canales and he already has a built-in understanding of basically what the offense is going to be. It's going to be pretty easy path for him to make this roster as a depth wide receiver, because you take a look at, the top is the top, right? Evans, Godwin, Gage. After that, anybody's guess. You drafted Trey Palmer. You've got Oh my goodness, I'm totally blanking. Devin Tompkins, who's more of a return guy than he is a receiver, but he can still play a little bit of receiver. But it's a position that we've talked about the Bucs being extremely thin when it comes to their depth. So I would say, even though he's brought in as like a tryout player, I would think, unless everything goes south for this guy, it's going to be pretty easy for him to jump on as a number 4 or number 5 receiver.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. The reason, so when I was sitting there thinking about who my breakout player for this season was going to be, this was the final straw. Like, this was the final straw that made me pick Baker, because David Moore, like, the stats are great. And obviously he's had his best, success with Dave Canales and that Seattle Seahawks coaching staff as a group. And, he's coming off of a knee injury. David is. He was actually with the Bears in 2022, didn't play because of the knee injury. And then, like you said, last time he played, I think it was split between the Packers and Broncos is what you said. And I think that's accurate. But the experience there within the system is he's going to accelerate that learning curve for Chris Godwin, Russell Gage, Mike Evans, anybody else that might be ahead of him in the depth chart. But then, also it gives him an opportunity to hopefully revive his NFL career. Like you said, he's still very, very young. And again, the faster that everybody can get on the same page. So now, just to kind of reiterate my points, right? We've got an offense coordinator here who had a plan before, or was at least part of a plan before, to utilize this quarterback specifically. Now you're bringing in a receiver who knows how to speak the language, knows the concepts, knows the thought processes, and can help not just the receiver, but the quarterback accelerate their learning curve for those processes. I mean, they're just doing a lot of good things to really help Baker. I'm saying Baker Mayfield, guys, because I think Baker Mayfield is quarterback number 1 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Look, if it's Kyle Trask, every Gator fan that's listening to the show, feel free to come at me on Twitter and let me know how horribly wrong I was. But I just think that's what's going to happen here. So I like the move. Again, and if David Moore never touches the field for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the fact that he's going to be here through this OTA process, and obviously you assume through training camp and all these things, to essentially be a teaching accelerator for Dave Canales, I don't think it should be undersold. I'm not saying book the Super Bowl parade or anything, but I think it is very impactful.
All right. With that, we are going to bid you all a fair adieu. We want to thank you all for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. And our everydayers, Evan Klosky is going to bring the heat on WTSP Wednesday tomorrow. In the meantime, if you have topics, thoughts, reactions to David's love of Baker Mayfield, if you want
and Justin Fields, the number 6 fantasy quarterback last year, because
of rushing.
Number 6 fantasy quarterback
because of rushing.
Number 6 quarterback in fantasy last year.
Yeah, he's a running back. That's
number 6 quarterback in fantasy last year.
It's like when ESPN lets you start Taysom Hill at tight end when he was the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. It's the same thing.
More outro.
Justin Fields is terrible. If you want to take my side on the Justin Fields debate, because you all know that I'm right, make sure that you are sending those questions, thoughts, reactions, and comments to LockedOnBucsPodcast@gmail.com or by DMing us on Twitter at LockedOnBucs. Check out David's work over at BucsGameDay.com. Check out mine over at BucsNation.com. And of course, follow everything on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and at DHarrison82. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.